So pay gaps is quite an obvious one. Um, Male footballers, the transfers of male footballers, hundreds of millions nowadays, where female footballers are still in the thousands, maybe the rare millions, but never hundred hundreds of millions. And in terms of the pay they get, so luckily, like I said, we're developing, but in the past, female footballers, and still some in present day, had to work another job alongside their footballing career where men can live a very sustainable life off of the pay they get from just playing football. Um, Women will earn a very average salary, where men earn millions sometimes, but at the very least hundreds of thousands. There is a massive pay gap between the genders in football, and there are some points that could be argued that the pay gap is fair. So, for example, men's football currently brings in a lot more money through more spectators. There's more people watching the men's football, more people putting money into men's football. Therefore, the players should get more out of it because they're producing more money, I suppose, in a way, than women. Um, so there's that argument that would be a reason why the pay gap is fair, but there's also arguments that why should women get paid any less than men if they're doing exactly the same job, they're playing exactly the same football, playing for the same teams, why should they be paid any differently? Um, and there's an especially ongoing argument in terms of US football again, because actually currently the women's US team actually brings in more spectators, more money than the men's football team does. So should they be paid more than the men's football team if you're going by the standards that a lot of the arguments are made, in the more money you bring in, the more money you get. I mean, there's an ongoing argument there, and it's a debate that there's two sides to, and it's hard to determine a point of agreement. I suppose at the moment it depends on clubs. So clubs such as Lewis, they have equality in terms of their pay between women and men, where some clubs do not. In terms of opportunities, again, there's a massive inequality there. So, for example, women's football teams do not get to play in the same facilities as men's football teams. So, luckily, there's occasional opportunity for women to play in the same stadium. For example, Brighton women's team sometimes get the opportunity to play at the Amex, but the men's football team play in there week in, week out. Is that fair? If it's the same team, same club, just different genders, is that fair that the women's team has to play in poorer facilities? Again, you can use the same argument that the men's team bring in more money, so they should have the better facilities, but there's that opposing argument again as well. It's an ongoing discussion and ongoing argument that requires a lot of discussion to resolve. It's again very hard to find a common ground there, or a sense of agreement. But it's a clear inequality there in terms of facilities, at least anyway. Men get a lot better equipment, a lot better training facilities than the women's team do. Slowly we're getting there in terms of equality, but we're not quite there yet. Additionally, like I said, with sponsorship as well, you will find that most professional male footballers will be sponsored by big brands such as Nike and Adidas, where they get these big promotional adverts or posters. Their boots are designed specifically to them, sold worldwide. Women do not have that opportunity. Some women do, but very few. Very few in comparison to male footballers. Is it fair that men have the opportunity to earn thousands, hundreds and thousands through sponsorship deals that women don't have the opportunity to gain? Is it fair that men are offered those sponsorship deals and women aren't? Again, it's a massive talking point, massive discussion, and it's something that is changing. You see, like, a lot more promotion of players such as Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe, like I mentioned before, that US women's team. A lot more coverage of that and a lot more sponsorship towards those teams now. But it's still much less than the men's teams, and they still earn a lot less as there's less opportunity for sponsorship, worse facilities, massive pay gaps. And is it all down to those stereotypes, those initial stereotypes? There's decreased participation from a young age because of those stereotypes, which means there's less women participating, less women able to thrive and develop as individual footballers, meaning the sport, the women's football, can't develop as a sport and can't improve. If they were given those facilities and those opportunities, the women's football as a sport would improve, the players would improve, the sport would improve, and the number of spectators would therefore increase as the quality of performance is increasing also. And then the playing field would almost level out, and then there would definitely be discussion surrounding inequality in terms of pay and sponsorship and coverage in the media. We need that initial increase in opportunity from a young age and increase of publication of women's football, I suppose, and encouragement of participation from a young age, for that to have a knock-on effect in the future and increase the quality of football for women. If they were given that equal opportunity, they may well be at a level playing field with male footballers. And then there would be a definite discussion about pay, etc. In terms of prevention of gender issues in football, obviously what I just said is very key. We need to increase the encouragement of participation from a young age. So we need to encourage more girls to participate, and that's something that is happening at the moment. With the recent World Cup, there was major coverage of the Women's World Cup this year. The Women's World Cup was broadcast on satellite TV, BBC, where anyone could watch it, which was fantastic, and it was promoted majorly, and it has caused participation in football to increase massively in terms of female participation, at least anyway. The prevention of gender issues all comes down to that initial discussion point of the influences over those stereotypes. So the parental influence and the educational influence and the media influence. If there's a positive influence in terms of participation by females in football, so there's more female role models to look up to, there's more coverage of female football, and parents are encouraging girls to participate more because they're seeing the positive impact it can have on their young child's future, then that's going to increase participation from a young age and increase the quality of women's football. And there won't be so much of a gender issue in football because it will be seen as an equal sport. That's what we can hope anyway. Of course, you can never predict the future, but that's what we can hope to achieve through that initial change in our roots of gender issues in football. I suppose another thing is that the clubs themselves need to make more of an effort to treat both the women's teams and the men's teams equally. For example, a positive example actually is Manchester City. So Manchester City women's team is a fairly new women's team, and I actually personally see a lot of coverage of Manchester City women's football on social media. Obviously, men's football does get more, but I do see quite a bit of coverage of that, and particularly on a national scale, team have a lot more. They receive a lot more coverage nowadays as well. Actually, perhaps since the World Cup, I definitely see a lot more publication and coverage in the media on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram. Again, it's not an equal platform. There's so much more coverage on mainstream media and news articles and things like that. There's much more coverage of the men's football, and that's obviously something that does need to change. We need a equal platform for both genders. But we are slowly developing and improving. There is a lot more coverage of women's football in comparison to 1 year ago, at the minimum, let alone 10 years ago. There's a massive difference and a positive one. And if we continue to go the same route that we have so far and increase that positive view on women's football and that publication, that encouragement of participation, then hopefully it will just continue to rise as a sport, and we will eventually get an equal platform for both genders in football. Obviously, this is only in football. There are many other sports as well. I've focused on football here, but many of the issues in football are present in other sports as well, and many of those issues are similarly rooted in terms of education in infant school and secondary school, parental influence, and the media. A lot of those are the same reasons behind gender issues in other sports as well. So we need to look at those deep-rooted issues and make changes there for that to have a positive impact on gender issues as a whole in sport.